We are back. Top players of 2023. Welcome, Blue Wall fans. I enjoy you. I love you at events. Please keep coming. Quick rules about what my top players are, and then we'll get right into it. We got 3v3 only. RLCS basically only. That's all I'm really going to talk about here, because that's the only thing that really matters. Come on. Let's be real. On top of that, one player per team, barring probably one exception, which has not appeared yet and still hasn't appeared yet, but you can kind of guess where he's going to land now at this point. Let's get right into it, and I'll explain my reasoning for the way I have my picks. But first, the first player we got to talk about is M0nkey M00n at number 4, the regional king himself. He was insane. Winter and spring regionally, no one matched M0nkey M00n. He was number 1 in goals per game in winter, number 1 in tally, number 2 in saves. In spring, number 2 goals per game, number 4 in tally, number 2 in saves. Number 1, if you combine both of them, in goals per game, tally, and saves per game. M0nkey M00n was unmatched regionally. Obviously, winter, BDS did not make it to the major, so it wasn't that great of winter for them, but M0nkey M00n was putting up numbers. Even in the fall, he was also just putting up numbers for his team, trying to put them on his back to get them to events. And then finally, when Rise joined the team, they finally started to see some success there. Him playing with Seiko and Rise really means that M0nkey M00n, like, he's always been that anchor on BDS, but he's really had to, like, push that even more, because with Rise and Seiko, they both want to be on the offensive side of the field for sure. When you look at it, main event, he was only number 14 in saves per game, but to put this into perspective, he was still number 1 on his team. Rise was dead last of all players put up saves, and I think Seiko was somewhere near the bottom as well. So BDS didn't have to play a ton of defense there. He was number 2 in score per game, and that's another thing that I want to talk about is, sure, it doesn't, so a score per game isn't the most important stat, but it does show who on the team is controlling the ball more or making more of an impact. Like, they have the ball more often than their teammates. And number 2 score per game really shows that. Shows that M0nkey M00n, while being that anchor after the offensive chance by Rise or Seiko, he's got to control that midfield and control that play. And he does it better than basically anyone in the game. So M0nkey M00n, huge shout out there. Talk about, main event, number 2 score per game, number 6 in tally, number 14 in saves per game. Spring major, number 1 saves per game, number 7 in score per game as well there. M0nkey M00n, fantastic year for them. They obviously were the grand finalists in Worlds and Spring. And BDS really found their form as they picked up Rise. But M0nkey M00n the entire year was just regionally massive. Still one of the best players in the world. He's still keeping up with that. It's going to be interesting to see with his new team dynamic how that fares for him going into next year. But don't count out M0nkey M00n, because this guy performs on the big stage and regionally. I can't wait to see him back playing against Europe's finest and seeing what numbers he puts up next season. I think he'll surprise some people next season and maybe even move up on the list. Who knows? Moving on. Number 3, and this one's going to be controversial. I know. But I'm putting Vatira here at number 3. It's kind of hard to place exactly where to put Vatira. Obviously, I think most people have him as number 2, right? But it's hard because at both majors, for Spring and Worlds, like, K-Corp didn't have the best of numbers, and that's mostly because of how they drew their brackets. You know, they move up through the upper bracket, then have to play 2 really tough teams and get bounced out and get dominated. But the reason why he's number 3 is maybe because of that, right? There was 2 teams clearly better than K-Corp by the end of the year in Spring and Worlds. Obviously, he has the Winter Major Championship to hold high. He got the Winter Major MVP. I also want to check real quick. I believe he was defensive MVP at Worlds, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll talk about that in a second. Winter Major MVP, number 1 score per game, number 1 goals per game, number 2 shots, number 5 tally. Exotic actually was number 2 in tally for that one. So it's not the Vatira show only. I think most people perceive K-Corp as just like, it's Vatira's game, right? And I think Vatira does deserve a lot of credit there. He is definitely one of the more dominant players on a team. We talked about this a little bit earlier with First Killer. I'd put probably First Killer on that list. Like apparently Jack maybe as well, maybe a Zen as well. But I'm just look this up real quick. He did win defensive MVP. Okay. So from there, World Championship defensive MVP, I think that's a sham. He should have never won that, to be fair. His team wasn't that great on defense in that thing. They were like number 4. Vitality. One of the Vitality players should have absolutely won that award. No offense to Vatira. But their numbers weren't amazing at Worlds, but it's mostly because of they just get bounced out. They have a really good showing at first, but then when they play BDS or Vitality, they kind of get squashed, basically. So Vatira, like, there's no great numbers to explain to you how good he is in the Spring Major or World Championship, but that's mostly because of how good BDS and Vitality were. But again, that Winter Major, he got at least 1 trophy this year. I bet he'll get another trophy in 2024. He was fantastic as always, but for me, I have him at number 3. But it really comes down to like the European domination, and it's so difficult when you're dominating as a region, but then you just kind of fall behind 2 of the other teams. And most of this is going to be weighted towards Spring and Worlds. It's really tough to not. On top of that, between Spring and Worlds is not much time, so pretty much nothing changed from Spring to Worlds. There was not a lot of big upsets, not a lot of teams moving from one spot to another, like at least at the very top. There was a little bit of that in the, like maybe going from a top 4 to a top 9 for like a Rule 1 or something like that, or Team Liquid moving back up into the top 4. But for K-Corp, Vitality, and BDS, we know without a doubt it was Vitality number 1, BDS number 2, K-Corp number 3. There's really no other way to go about it. The World Championship, I think their one downfall for K-Corp and Vatira was that first BDS matchup in Group A where they got absolutely smoked, it felt like. It was a 4-1 series. There was close games in there, but BDS was controlling the field and K-Corp looked down and out. They obviously bounced back and they looked fantastic later on in that. So they went from that match to playing Complexity, who was a very good team in that tournament. And that was with Complexity going up 2-0 in that series. K-Corp brought it back and won that in Game 7. So kudos to them. It was a little bit of a tough road, but they pulled it out. Then they got Gen G and they dominated them 4-0. But because they lost to BDS, they had to then play Vitality later. Fantastic series. One of the best series maybe of all time. If you didn't see that series, Vitality K-Corp, go back and watch it. Not only for the gameplay, but the atmosphere in the arena was electric. So definitely go check that out. But because of that BDS loss, they had to play Vitality, and then they got beaten there again. So Vatira falls to number 3, maybe more due to his team stand-in than maybe his performance. It's kind of, we'll talk about number 2 in our next video, so I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but I think a lot of people might say I should flip number 2 and number 3, but this is how I did my list. Vatira will sit at number 3 next year. We'll see. Could be the best player in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So I want to see some great matches between him and Vitality and against anyone else that emerges. But Vatira will definitely be probably top 3 again. I'm going to say that's a safe guess that he'll be a top 3 player in the world next year. So I'm looking forward to it. But thank you guys for watching. And we'll be back with number 2 and number 1. We already know who they are by this point. But do you know what order? You probably do. All right. We'll see you in the next video.